Hi, this is the Be Well with Michelle Greenwell podcast. Our heartwarming conversation is designed to lift you on your wellness journey. Grab your cup of tea and enjoy the podcast. Welcome everyone to the Be Well with Michelle Greenwell podcast, and it is my pleasure today to introduce CandyMotzek. And Candy is a coach for life coaches who helps people on the start of their entrepreneurial journey to achieving full client lists and a successful business. And our topic today is not designed just for the coaches, but for everyone looking for a successful path in life. And today we'll be exploring the importance of identifying where you want to be so you know what path you want to be on and why you want to make choices towards that endeavor rather than maybe focusing on things that you're comfortable with or the ones that interest you and might pull you over. Candy worked in the corporate world for many years until she felt the need to branch out on her own and to do something that could inspire her creative side in business. Life coaching drew Candy in as she could understand the mindset that people needed to succeed in business and understand business. And without this base understanding, it can take years of trial and error for many business owners to find their way into the path of success, with a lot of angst, failure, and disappointments in the wake. I don't understand any of those. I'd be a liar. Okay, Here's what some of the clients say about Candy. Candy was super fantastic. She was very open, frank, yet sensitive. I enjoyed every session and always looked forward to the sessions. Most importantly, the interactions, activities, and resources were extremely helpful in supporting me to navigate and getting me unstuck in my career. Because of the experience, I now have so much clarity of purpose and I feel so empowered. And this other one I enjoyed reading. While you are a fantastic coach, you've been so much more than that for me this year. And I'm so grateful for your support, your listening ear, your advice, and going above and beyond. This has been a year of thinking and doing things that are uncomfortable and also life-changing. And I look forward to continuing that journey, and I'm grateful to have you with me. So it is my delight to have Candy here today to look at the big picture and to help us all sort out what truly matters in the course of our chosen path. All right, so I formally say hello, Candy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. And there's something so powerful about hearing these notes from my clients being read out loud. It really hits differently, and I'm deeply touched. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know sometimes we're looking, we collect those testimonials and then we forget about them in the course of putting things together, critiquing ourselves, looking at things from a different perspective. And sometimes it is nice to get back to what do people see, what do people hear, and how did we make them feel, which is always so grand.
It's everything.
Yeah. All right, before we dive into our conversation, what kind of tea did you prepare today, Candy?
So today I have a breakfast in Paris tea, and I've got it here in you can only see it when I have it facing you, my Be Still mug that I got. It's lavender, bergamot, and vanilla, a black tea because it's a breakfast tea.
Nice. That's the combination of lavender with vanilla is a really nice combination with black tea. Yeah.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Love it.
Beautiful. All right. And I have my dance debut mug. So this mug has been around for a very long time as my company's 36 years or something. So anyway, it's an old mug of all the things that I have enjoyed doing, which is dancing on top of the mountain. That's what the logo is on the front. But I put in it the tea blend for the Cape Breton Tea Company, which is the Tea with Intention series, Releasing the Warrior. And this is a blend that some people, like when you're in the mindset to make a change, you really enjoy the tea. But if you are not ready to make a change, then you taste the tea and you can taste something in it that goes, it just kind of gives you that little push. So this is my business partner would say the love it or hate it kind of tea. But the thing about it is when I drink this tea, big things always happen. So in our conversation today, I was trying to think about what kind of tea do I want? And as people are kind of floating around trying to figure out where they're going, that sometimes is where you need that push. So I wanted to pull that in. So I wanted to highlight 2 ingredients from the blend. So one is, first of all, releasing the warrior is from the wood element. So that's your core structure. That's how the trunk stands, how the roots go out under the ground, so you know where you are. And it supports liver and gallbladder, those 2 systems. And this typically would be about anger and resentment. So if this is out of balance, then we tend to kind of react a little bit harsher than we thought we wanted to react, or we get emotionally disturbed by something that normally wouldn't bother us. And so I wanted to bring that to the table, especially as we're doing some nudging today, just for people to be able to maybe move differently on their path. So we have juniper berry, and juniper berry supports clarity of purpose, increasing your vision for outcome, prosperity, wisdom, protection on the journey, and the discovery of love or attraction. That's an awful lot for Juneberry. Juniper berry, sorry. Yeah. So, and I think about, a lot of times people have them in front of their homes, and they often have them up close to the house or down the driveway or the sidewalk. And so if you start to think about the power that actually that has as you walk that path, it can be really valuable to think about. So the second one is sage. Now, this one is known for supporting physical health, protection, and wisdom for moving us forward. And then the last part is on every package of tea, there's an affirmation. So I'm just going to pick up the package. On this one, there's an affirmation. Well, I'm going to get a reflection off the sunlight.
Oh, there it is. I got it. I can see it now. Yeah.
Okay. There's a little green symbol in the top corner there. But every one in this series has an affirmation on the front, but also has 2 or 3 on the back. But the one I thought that fit for the conversation. Linked to the wood element, this blend supports opening up to express what's most important, to nourish, rejuvenate, and reorganize for full potential. And I think that's where our conversation is going to head. So with that, I wanted to set the conversation up. And for people listening, if you've got a water that you can sip on, or you have your own cup of tea there, we're going to bring in what's in this, Releasing the Warrior. And we have a cheers to you, Candy. Thank you for being here. And to everybody listening. Yep, that is. When I had it earlier today, I could really taste the licorice coming out, and now it's just a really mellow blend. So that's where it switches based on how you're feeling. So, okay, enough about tea. Let's get started on our conversation and dive into the wonderful wisdom that you have. So I wanted to talk about how people approach the freedom that they have in their life to try to explore things. And I know I've been thinking about my own kids, 20s and 30s, and that freedom to be able to do all the things they want to do, go to bed when they want to go to bed, make their choices, but then they want to be in business. And how do they zone in to be able to find that pathway and not just continue to kind of explore but never really get anywhere? As an entrepreneur, that could be really challenging. So I'm going to open the floor for you.
Oh, I love it. And it was such a great question. I looked at it and kind of pondered on it this morning. So thank you for asking it. And just to sort of pull in the element of the tea, as I was reading the questions and sort of getting ready for today, I brought a few things with me just to sort of continue to ground us in the tea. So I'll show you what I've got here is that first, your description of the tea was about lighting the light within. And this white honey or beeswax candle is one that I use just to create that space. I love it because it's not white. It's kind of that soft beeswax kind of look. So I wanted to bring that. And it also touches on this element of wood with the fire and wood and how they go together. The other thing I brought is white sage. This is one of my smudging. And I know it's not the same kind of sage that you have in the tea, but it just really felt appropriate, especially given that so often what we want is clarity. And lots of times what we need for clarity is to clear, right? We just need to clear those things out. And then I get these gifts in my backyard and I wanted to bring them today. So I've got on my right hand, this is a feather that an owl left for me one morning. I walk out every morning and I have some big trees in my backyard. And so this was a gift from one of the owls that hangs out in the tree in the back. And then this, I have also lots of eagles, and they leave me little gifts such as this. This is what kind of made me think when I read that question to begin with, this idea about, as you're younger and you want to be independent, but then you want to start creating this life and this business. And so when I think of the trees and then I think of the birds, they get this viewpoint, right? Like they have a really deep connection with the forest, and they have that viewpoint as well. And so for me, that sort of brings together everything to do with the wood in there. Specifically, when you said, share what your experiences are with entrepreneurs that want to treat their life and business in a similar regard. And I think that for me, a lot of it's about awareness, like to really notice those things that show up that are meaningful for you, but it's not like they're kind of like an interruption. Like they're not a quick fancy distraction that you might chase after, but there's some deep meaning there. And so younger adults who are then making that transition, maybe that's a place for them to look. What do you think? Like this idea of look for the meaning and look for that connection. Have you experienced that too?
I remember a great uncle one time having a conversation about the advice he had given his kids. And it had been, find what you enjoy doing or find a job you really like, and then climb the ladder. And I thought, well, that's very interesting, because instead of saying, go to school and train in something, it was first find the job that interests you, and then you'll know what training you want to get. And so that same idea of when you're thinking about what draws you in, what interests you, what are the things that you want to spend all day doing or occupying a lot of your time thinking about? And, if it's not of interest to you, then will that mean you're going to be searching for that work-life balance all the time because you're working so much time thinking in the things you don't want to think about? So that's kind of where I sit on it. I watched his kids to see how they came through, and they got amazing jobs and very successful careers, and they did climb the ladder and were very successful at what they were doing, and they made major contributions, which is interesting. And the one now is a little bit older than I am. She's now retired, but she's gone back to school. And she's gone back to study things that she just thinks is really interesting. But now she's looking at it with a different viewpoint. So, yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
well, it kind of does. And the thing that that is interesting is, inherent in that description of your uncle and what he showed people or taught people or shared is this: find this thing that you're interested in and then stick with it, right? Like, don't go find another ladder to climb. Find that ladder that's the growing your mastery through apprenticeship of this thing that is meaningful, instead of find something, get kind of good, and then and then move on. Because the way you described your cousin, like not only were they successful, outwardly successful, but then there's that place where there's the gift, like part of the learning is the gift that we return to the people who are farther down the metaphorical ladder too, right? Because we get better, we can help those other people that are climbing as well. And I think it's really valuable and really interesting.
And that really segues beautifully into a question that I think was further down, but I'll bring it in here in that. So for those people listening I'm not retired, but I'm moving towards that age. And my generation and my parents' generation did a lot with service organizations and a lot of volunteer time, building playgrounds and recreational buildings, things that the government might take care of now that didn't then, but it was a way that they contributed within their community. And so I was really thinking about the advice you would offer as a coach to those people who are in their 20s and 30s for them to get connected in the community and find that passion. You want to talk a little bit about some of the ideas you might have with that?
Yeah. So, at first part, it's like there's that volunteerism, right? And I think it's really a valuable part of our growth. First, we're doing something that's of service. We're contributing to something. And it reminds me as well, like I said, when I was preparing, there was a couple of things that really struck out for me in the way that you described these questions. And so I looked back at this idea of infusion again, like what is tea, and this idea of it infusing. And it said the act of adding one thing to another to make it stronger or better. And that kind of encapsulates this idea about making your place in a community by serving and contributing, and together there is so much more value there, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I love the idea of people helping out and building things, be it ideas, be it organizations, be it playgrounds or whatever. But there's that coming together where everybody does a part and somehow we create something just so much more than we might have. The other side of it that I was thinking is that it makes me sound old, but these days we get used to this dollar for hour, the hours for dollar conundrum. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if we're working, we should be getting paid what we're worth. And there's always this equating money with our time and our energy and our service. Whereas when we do something like contribute and build community and work together on something, we're giving of our time and our energy, but with no expectation of money. And it really separates us from that overtly and overly capitalistic view of how we determine who we are. So younger adults, but not just younger adults, there's middle-aged people that I know who are a little bit bored, a little bit at loose ends, nearing retirement or early retirement, and they're not contributing anymore. And that's what this is, right? It's like, how do we contribute to make the world better, make our lives better, make somebody else's life better?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those people who are in a position where they're a little bit shyer, maybe they don't have the skills that they want to have, but they don't know how to get them, then to get into a situation where you're not working at something where you have to meet timelines. I mean, you do if you're volunteering too, but in a different way. But you have this opportunity to just stand on middle ground, and you can ask questions and you can observe how other people are doing things. And if you're on the shyer end, you can choose to speak or choose not to speak. But the fact that you're there putting in that extra bit of time and effort and an extra set of hands to carry or hammer or whatever just makes that difference in the community. And it's a great way to develop skills that you can bring back into business and bring back in as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. 100%. I agree. And then when I think of people who are shyer, or maybe my term is introverted because I'm a huge introvert, is that lots of times we want to go and do these things, but we don't like that very light socializing, that, light chatting that you might do at a party or a networking event. But when you're involved with something, in building something or contributing or creating an organization, you've got a reason to be there. And it's so much easier to have really good conversations with people. So it's actually from that standpoint, I found it really helpful. I used to do a ton of volunteering. I don't do as much as I used to, but I miss it. It was
Mm-hmm.
fun and I learned
Mm-hmm.
a lot. And I
Mm-hmm.
met some really interesting people too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing for me as well. And as I was thinking about as an entrepreneur, how do you get better at the subject that you're working with or the business sector that you're working in? When you belong to different organizations, a lot of people, my husband and I were joking, was always, please do not ask me to sit on a board. I don't want to sit on a board. I don't want to know how to do governance. I don't want to have to take notes and make sure we dotted the I's. But both of us are now in those positions where that's what we do. And I look back and I think, but oh my goodness, the skills I've developed and the incredible people I've met as a result of putting myself into that position. And as I look back and I was thinking, what would I want to offer to the younger generation? Is the richness that's in that opportunity. And then where does that take you? Because your career then, you might be influenced by somebody that you wouldn't have even thought about the way that they've chosen to do their work. And it might suit what you want to do, but you get to observe them and see if that's a fit for you.
Yeah. And a lot of people in their 20s and 30s are looking for mentors, right? And they're searching for mentors. Um, but this is actually a way of getting a bit of a collective mentor, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
instead of looking for that individual that will take you under their wing, then you get to be part of an organization and you can learn from all of it. Plus, you also learn how people work together, different personalities, different leadership styles, and all that sort of stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an added bonus. And maybe even, I don't know, I think there's a huge emphasis on mentoring. I'm not so sure that that's the right relationship for everyone. This
Mm-hmm.
might give you a little bit of a softer approach to it and where you
Mm-hmm.
get more, I don't know, like kind of more wind under your sails or more wind in your wings somehow because you're really doing something. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
this transactional thing. We're building something bigger together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as we've talked about that as an informal way of gaining education, you work as a coach for coaches.
I do.
So do you want to explain a little bit about what that is for somebody who's never worked with a coach?
Sure. So we'll start with really what coaching is. And for me, coaching is that place where you get to be seen and heard and acknowledged, and you have this space just to be yourself. It's not a space that many of us experience very often these days. We're all busy and looking out for the next busy thing. But that's one of the things that coaching does is it gives you a place to kind of settle and breathe and belong. And then what happens as a result of that is you start to learn more about yourself and you start to shift some of those really deep perspectives and beliefs that you have about yourself. And so it's hugely transformational. Um, and gosh, I believe that everyone could benefit from working with a coach. So that's kind of what coaching is. Not somebody telling you what to do, but somebody creating this space for you to decide what you'd like to do for yourself and to look at yourself in a different way to really see um, how amazing you are. People don't see how fabulous they are. I love that. So then the work that I do is twofold. So I do the business work of setting up a business and finding clients and all of that. And on a mechanical basis, that's overtly quite simple. But where it's not simple is that we run up against every piece of self doubt we would ever experience in our life. Self doubt and procrastination and worry and all of those things. And so the logistics of how to set up a coaching business, while it's important and there's faster ways of doing it and things that are essential and things that are not that needed. But the real work is in allowing yourself to do the work. And so it's, it comes back to pure coaching, even at that level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think about how we either dive in or we follow along. There's the two ways. I'm more of the dive in person and then go, oh, now that I'm swimming, what do I do? Where's the shore? Whereas other people might hold back and then take their time. But if you do have somebody to talk to that isn't your best friend, that says all the right things to you so that you can stay in the same place where you are, because that's how your relationship works. It's that opportunity to have somebody else looking through the mirror and reflecting and making those questions happen that best friends won't do necessarily.
Yeah. Yes. And also the questions that sometimes they make you really uncomfortable, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, and a coach gets to be the person that has the courage to have those conversations with you, because you get to do what you want with it, right? Like, life isn't about being comfortable all the time. We want to grow. We want to be more of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. I just was looking for the ways that we could start to look a little bit differently at things. And I know we're focused on entrepreneurs and business and careers, but even when we're looking at, we were talking about, what you want to do when you're not doing work and you want to find those things. Sometimes I'll say from here, the living room is set up very comfortably, and it's very easy to find my way to the couch when I think I need a break. And then it's very easy to binge watch something, and I certainly cannot turn the button off. I know that about myself. So one episode leads to 10. So as people are thinking about too how they want to approach their regular part of their life, not their business part, but how they really want to live, having a coach also allows that opportunity to reflect on how are you balancing business and how are you balancing the things you really want to do in your life for you.
Yes.
And that opportunity to, again, discover and reflect more so than that friend who's really good at sitting next to you on the couch binge watching with you, or saying, did you see the latest episode of something, and keeping you from discovering and exploring.
Yeah. And it's interesting because so often people don't know what having a coach is. We get what having a best friend is, or a good friend, a good supportive friend who loves us and that we love them. But having a coach is really different, right? And I like the idea about I can't turn the episode off. But maybe the coach helps to put that controller on the other side of the room, so that you have to decide if you actually want to get off your cozy couch and go and actually turn it off or not, right? Maybe it makes it just a little bit more difficult, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So when you're looking at the people that you work with, they're like you said, they're having a conversation for themselves and they get to be in their place. So it's a vulnerable place to be, because so often we haven't asked ourselves the questions, or we've been so good at critiquing ourselves that we get ourselves tied up in knots, thinking we can't do something. You want to talk a little bit maybe about some of the experiences you have with some of the people that you've coached and helping them get out of that circle or that knot of not being sure they're who they are.
Yeah. And there's surprisingly a lot of people that are like that aren't quite sure who they are. Maybe they used to know, but then life has happened, but they haven't sort of kept up with who they are. And I find a lot of people come to me and say, it's like, I've lost who I am. Right. So the experience, I think that it's easier when we don't try to rush it. I have a number of clients that I have worked with for years, We go through waves. Sometimes we speak every week. Sometimes we speak multiple times a week. And then maybe we go a couple of months where we don't really talk much. But there is this building the comfort. It's three types of comfort. There's the comfort with me as their coach. There's the comfort of them expressing who they are. And then there's the comfort of them allowing themselves to even think those things, because it really can rock your boat, right? So time and patience. And usually it's some of the simplest questions are the most difficult and the most profound. So for years I followed Deepak Chopra, and some of these soul questions that he's asked for years. Who are you? What do you want? These simple questions can be super scary for people when I say, so what do you want? And they just like, I don't know. And so it takes time. Yeah, it takes time. And just, this is probably not exactly the way a coach is supposed to respond, but I love my clients. I intentionally love them. I love them as humans. I love the person that I know that they can become. And I hope that that helps to create a safe space for them to turn around and be honest with themselves and to learn to love themselves too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that leads me to thinking too about you moved out of the corporate world and you moved into coaching. So what was the draw for you to make that transitional piece?
Yeah, so big pause there. I've always been a coach. So even before I did my coach training, I was the person that in the office, no matter what role I had, whether I was the office manager or the exec, people would wander into my office and close the door and say, "Hey, I got something going on. Can we talk about it?" So that always happened. And the real thing is that I had such a history of climbing the ladder, but climbing the ladder that was not my ladder, and doing so much stuff to please other people, to keep up my side of the bargain, to make promises and to support people in a way that I was more about pleasing them than I was about being true to myself. Mm-hmm. And very shoddy boundaries, coupled with some racism and some sexism. I was senior leader in a very male dominated field. And so there was always a little bit of uncomfortable there. And eventually I just burned up, just fried right up. And then with time, after I healed and did just a ton of therapy, I realized that I just couldn't keep being that person, that I got to be my own person. I got to ask myself my own questions. Who am I? What do I actually want? Right. And so that's where becoming a coach turned into a business. And then, I left corporate because I just couldn't do that anymore. I had done my time of pleasing everybody and not pleasing myself in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. What's interesting, always asking people, we all have different backgrounds. We all have different upbringings. We have all these lovely ways that we've gotten to where we are and the gifts that come with that, in how we can bring our resiliency forward. And all of us have that story of that catalyst that flipped that switch and just really made us move. And it seems like we get the message and we have a few pains, then we get the message, we have some more pain, then we get the message and we have a little bit more pain, but we still aren't listening. And it takes that huge catharsis to be able to push us and turf us to the next direction. And as I'm saying that, it would be so lovely if people were able to recognize those first cues and go, I understand something's not feeling quite right. And then to be able to speak to a coach, to be able to talk about that bit, instead of thinking maybe it's mental health that they need to, but by the time it's mental health, it's usually we've hit the crisis point.
Right.
But wouldn't it be nice if
we're
we
long
stopped,
past that by then?
if we'd stopped and actually said, hey, let me sit with somebody who can help me sort these pieces out, because this pain in my shoulder isn't making any sense at all. Why is it there? And what can I do about it? And so as people are listening, I'm hoping that they're kind of reflecting on some of the things that might be going on in their own life. And maybe they do have a pain in their shoulder or a stiffness somewhere that is signaling to them they're not quite in the right place. And or it's time to make a change, or it's time to shift their focus. And then to think about, who would I want to reach out with, or who do I want to connect with who could help me make that idea come forward and transform it so that it's something that I feel like I could do and I could move into it. Because all of us don't want to have, I have the same, story of detriment and then rebuilding this body twice, because once wasn't good enough. I didn't listen to the cues the second time. So then thinking about, bypassing so much angst to realize that those couple of pains that are there are the signals that are waiting to be heard, and then moving forward.
Yeah, it reminds me of that quote, the universe whispers before it yells, right? And so what I think it would be lovely for us to be more in tune with our body and the messages, and to be resilient enough and safe enough in ourselves to know that the change will actually be better than what we're dealing with right now. Sometimes I see people, and I experienced that myself. Like, I didn't trust that it would actually get better. I thought that, yes, I knew this change needed to happen, but I didn't think it was going to be better. I thought it was going to be worse. And it was like, okay, hold your nose, hold your nose and jump into the water.
Yeah.
Part of it is, there's a piece that I just sort of wanted to say, is that we don't have to have major drama to make it worthwhile, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you talked about having to rebuild your body twice. And I look back on the mess that I made of my mental health, and it doesn't make the next evolution of who I am more worthwhile because I made it harder. And I know that I have that. Like, I kind of think that somehow it does. It's like, if it's not the hero's journey on steroids, then it's not going to be worthwhile. But why do I think that? Like, why do we think that we need the big crescendo drama for it to be satisfying, to be meaningful, to be evolution, right? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so easy to criticize or judge your action, and then it keeps you in the same place. And that doesn't make any sense, because wouldn't it just be as lovely to say, okay, I got this pain in my shoulder and it's trying to signal in me something, so I'm just going to go for a walk and just kind of sit with it and see what's going to happen. And then I've been for my walk and it loosened up. Oh, okay, it's just emotion. It has nothing to do with structure. I haven't broken anything. So if that's the case, now how can I support it? What's the next action I could take? Who can I talk to? Who can I bring into my circle? How can I reach out to other people and start to find the way that I want to move next? And move being, shifting rather than my dancer Tai Chi movement patterns. But and just realizing that, hey, if you take that moment to think about where can I start to make that shift, and then small steps.
Yes, yeah. Definitely small steps. Yeah. Just makes me sorry, I have all the thoughts going on right now. Wondering where else I've created crisis before I allowed myself to change, right? So there's maybe that's a question for the people that are listening. They're like, where have you actually created almost a crisis, you're not quite there yet, that you could just realize now and make that change. Like, wouldn't that be kind of an amazing gift to do that for yourself?
Yeah. And I have a colleague that she was always wanting to change the boss because it was the boss's fault for everything that happened.
Right.
And then she removed herself from that position. And on reflection later, she realized she kept trying to change the boss, but it was actually her that needed to change. But she couldn't do that while she was next to the boss. So she had to remove and go do something different in order for her to gain the perspective. And then to be able to come back and now she kind of dabbles in and out of that business, but on very different terms. And so I think, sometimes when we're working with colleagues that we think we're not getting along with them, but then if you start to sit back and look at it, but look at it from the perspective of what could I be doing differently, or how would it look if I did something differently? And just start to reflect on that.
Yeah. And I was just listening to another podcast and on the same vein. And the fellow said, and this sounds harsh, but I kind of like it because sometimes I like that. He said that he looked at his life and he decided that the most constructive thought that he could have is, it's all my fault. And now, it's all my fault, not from the place of mean judgment and blaming and shaming yourself, but looking at every relationship that you have, everything that you have in your life, and really taking that full responsibility. I don't like that relationship. Oh, it's up to me. Like, it's 100% up to me, because how we experience our relationship is an inside job, right? Like, there's always three relationships happening: what I think it is, what the other person thinks it is, and then the actual relationship. But if you go inside and say, you know what, how I experience this and everything to do with this is totally me. When I first heard it, I was like, oh, ouch. It felt harsh, but then I was like, oh, but it also kind of allows me to take a deep breath. It also kind of frees me, because now it's like, okay, it's up to me. I can choose, and that sort of is this full circle to the younger adults that you were talking about, who want the independence, who want freedom and independence, and to experience that, to know, hey, this is me. This is up to me. I liked it.
Yeah, this is up to me. And is this how I want to continue? And I always have that looking down the road 10 years and looking back, what would you tell yourself in 10 years' time? You say, why did you sit in that job when you hated it every day for so long? That was like 10 years longer than you should have been there. Was that what you're going to be saying 10 years down the road? Or are you going to look back and say, way to go? When you chose to go take that trip or go and study, how to make something, and that led you down a new path of interest, and look at the people you met. Yeah. Now, what are you going to be saying 10 years from now?
Right. And so to look at your life right now and go, 10 years from now, if this is how I'm living, is this satisfying, or do I need to want to, or need to make a change?
Yeah. And would I congratulate myself? Say, nice choice.
Yeah. Really.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. And I had said that to my daughter, who's in her late 20s. I said, so what would your 40-year-old self tell you? And when it came out of my mouth, I was thinking, I don't have a daughter that's that age. It's hard for me to think of that. But then I started to think, okay, when you're 40, what do you want to be saying about how you led those 20s? What do you want to look at? Do you went the safe route and you did everything according to the book, you didn't rock the boat. It was nice, but not ecstatic. There was anything that said, oh my gosh, I did that. Or do you want to go, you know what? I went bungee jumping. I did something that I never imagined I would do. And as a result of that, I met a whole new crew of people, Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the life I'm meant to be living, right?
Mm-hmm.
that life where you make the choices that it's like, that would be something. Let's do
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, as we're thinking about how people can start to make choices, how they're going to choose a coach, where do they go to get started, and what would you recommend that they do?
So there's many places that coaches hang out. The organization that I like the best is the International Coaching Federation. Not for any reason except that the coaches that are part of that organization, they subscribe to a certain code of ethics. They all have some coach training. Instead of just calling themselves a coach, they may have, or like I said earlier, I feel like I've always been a coach, but then I went and I got some training too. So we do that. And having a code of ethics, having professional code, I think is really important for coaches. It's important work to be helping people become the person that they want to be. And it's too important to just, talk to somebody that just has an opinion, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
just my opinion is just my opinion. It's not necessarily the way that's going to support you best. So, looking for a coach, go check out the ICF website. There's a huge roster of coaches there. And go and see, what description or what photo kind of catches your eye. Maybe there's somebody there that you could just reach out to. They're always really interesting people, and make a connection that way.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Okay. I always like to, well, actually, what I should ask you before I say this next part is how can people find you and what kinds of programs do you have?
Okay. So people can find me in all of the places online. The easiest place to find me is at my podcast. It's called She Coaches Coaches. I'm just getting ready to release my 200th episode. So there's lots on there for you to listen to. And I also think that it's hearing somebody's voice is really helpful too. You hear it in a different way than just reading it. So that I would recommend that. I have a website and all the stuff, but one place, that's where I would recommend you go. And the things that I have to offer are I coach coaches, just like my podcast says. So you can always find a way of working with me. I work with private clients. I also have a small group program called the Coaching Success Circle. And I also do coaching of high achievers who really want to have a great life. Just people that are pure life coaching. And it's just a little side business that I do, but I absolutely love it. I love to watch them grow. And so many of those people have then turned around and said, "Hey, I want to be a coach too." So it's super fun. So the easiest way is find me on my podcast, and you can see all the other ways of coming into my world through that.
Perfect. And I like the idea too about coming into your world, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a relationship builder piece. And for those people that are listening that haven't done it before, then it's having conversations, because not everybody's going to resonate the same way. And depending on what you're looking for at this time might be one way, and then down the road it could be a little bit differently. But also to just get into those conversations and start exploring. And that's going to also open some different doorways, even if you don't quite get into the coaching world, or you're looking at just you want to make some life changes, and you start finding these people to have these conversations. And again, it's not like the best friend who will agree with you as you unload how your week went and listen intently, but to actually have conversations that really challenge you and ask you those questions of what is it you want, and are you achieving what you thought you wanted, and where do you want to go?
Yeah. Yeah. And like your question, what would your 40-year-old self say about what how you're creating your world right now? Like, that's a great question. Add 10 years to our life and see where we're at.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I like to finish the conversation with some movement. And that's for those people that have been listening to the podcast. You might be driving in a car, and if you are, that's fine. Keep driving. You can think about it when you're finished. But I also like to get you moving because that's going to take all that we've talked about and all that we set up for you in a way that's going to help move you forward where you wanted to go and the reason why you chose to listen to this podcast. So what kinds of things could you recommend as a movement, or that's your favorite?
So my favorite is going for a walk. I love walking in the trees. I love walking on the beach, and I love walking my dog out in the farmlands as well. So there's always this thing about my feet on the ground, not unlike the card that you pulled at the beginning, and being out in fresh air in nature of all sorts. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And today I was just finishing some calls off, and I could just feel like I was not grounded anymore. There was so much going on, and it was just like a flurry. And I said, I have to go now. I need to go put my feet in the grass. And then and my office is right next to the deck. So I just went straight out into the grass, and that big breath and that big sigh. And it's like, oh, I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
And then, listening to the birds, we were talking about the birds before and the chatter that happens and nature takes over. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
I love that too. Yeah. Barefoot walking is a big deal. Yeah. It's good for all of us.
It's always like that transition too out of spring when you go from socks to bare feet. And it's that hard to get out of the socks. And then you get into bare feet and you wonder why you would ever put socks on. And which is also kind of a metaphor for life, because it's comfortable in the socks, but what happens when you go to bare feet? What happens when you put them in the sand and the grass and you try out all those different opportunities? So just that metaphor jumped into me. So anybody listening,
it's a good socks. One. And I actually often walk barefoot out to my backyard. So I work in my little she shed in the backyard, and I always start my day with meditation out here before I go in and get ready for the day. And many days I wear bare feet. And because I'm on the west coast of Canada, it doesn't get that cold here a lot. So it's not unusual for me to be walking barefoot early in March out to my little she shed. Oh, nice. So I love it.
That's lovely. I can't say that about the East Coast. Barefoot in the grass is like April, end of April. And now it's beautiful. Beautiful. And the ground that I have to walk on is all herbs. And which is different because I came from a place where I grew up with a lawn and, you cut the grass, but here it's just, there's a little bit of grass poking up, but most of it is herb. And so when I step onto it, and because of the tea company, I'm just so much more aware of how the herbs are supporting. And I just love putting my feet down into them and then knowing that they're right there for me.
I love that.
Yeah, which is really nice too. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah. So I wanted to share one little exercise because I was thinking about the way our conversation could go, and how sometimes moving forward into that future is a little bit tricky. And I have different exercises that I do when I'm working with clients or teaching some of my different classes. So I broke this down into something as simple as I could for a podcast. So what I'm just going to offer to people is to consider, not while you're driving, but when you're finished, to step into what would represent your past. So it might be a square on the floor, it might be a little piece of carpet on the floor, and just stand in it. And notice what it feels like, and notice what your breath is doing. You could take a sip of tea if you wanted, or a sip of water. But then what I would recommend is while you're standing there, to just roll your feet around in a clockwise motion. And as you're rolling your feet around, you just think about the gifts of the past that you have to move you forward. And then just see, I'm sitting down, so I'm just rolling, which I often do in my chair, which is then just kind of rolling from the sit bones around to the tailbone and back around to the sit bones again. But this one is with the feet. And then as you stand now in the past, notice how it feels and if there's a little bit of opening that's happened. Maybe a deeper breath. Maybe a big sigh. Maybe you notice a few muscles that start to let go. And then I would invite you to step somewhere that would represent your present. And as you step into that space, notice how you feel. Maybe it was the same as you started in your past. Maybe it's what it was in the past, but now you notice something else. And again, you could take a sip of tea, a drink of water. You might notice a deep breath. I'm going to grab my Releasing the Warrior. And then on this one, I would invite you to rock backward and forward on your feet. So as you rock backward, you lift up your toes. And then as you go forward, you're going to lift up your heels. And it's just a really gentle rock, so you don't have to go right up to the ball of the foot. Just a very gentle rock back and forth. If you're sitting on a chair, then it's back towards the tailbone, forward towards the sit bone. You'll notice your lower back. It's going to open and close as you do that. So as you finish with that, bring that back into the center and then notice how that feels. And if it feels comfortable, nice deep breath, then what I invite you to do next is to step into your future. And as you take that step forward, check in with the breath. Notice if how your feet feel are changing. And if you want to take a sip of water, another sip of tea, feel free to do that. We're going to do 3 actions here. I'm just going to almost finish my cup of tea. All right. So what I'm going to get you to do is rock side to side. So on your feet, you're going to roll over to the edges on one side, and then your toes go across the floor and you roll to the edges on the other side. And you want to just release your knees, release your hips. So you just sway nice and easy. You were out on the waves on a boat, just very gentle, back and forth. And you may notice that the breath starts to shift a little bit. Another sigh. And then I'd invite you to just stand with your feet flat and then start to roll into the center this time and then roll to the outside edges of the feet. So you're going open and then you're going to close everything up, coming to the inside. And with this one, you may notice the lower back start to shift, but also the shoulders. Could be a little bit in the neck. And you're just rolling back and forth. You may notice the breath has continued to go a little bit deeper. And then bring that back to the center. And then the last one, I'm just going to invite you to rise up onto the toes. And this one, instead of rocking backwards, we're just going to go flat. Just lowering it back to straight. Just noticing where your posture is. If you're seated, you might notice you're sitting up a little straighter. And then just rise up onto the toes again. And let that go flat. And then rise up one more time. And go flat. And for me, when I go up onto the toes, if I lose my balance, then I know I need to do a few more. If I rise up and it's like, oh, I can stay there, I can almost float there and then come back down, then I know I'm good. So if that helps you. Okay, so just notice now how you feel. And if you were standing on your feet, you may notice that the feet seem to almost have spread out across. So everything a little bit flatter and connected to the floor. And if you're sitting on your chair, you may notice it almost feels kind of that same way. Yes, you're sitting, but it's like the space is opened up. I guess is the best way to describe that. So now you're standing in your future. So if you want to turn yourself around and look back to wherever it was you stood that was your past, see if you hold on to that same relaxed, open feeling. And then you can look past, as you come back around, you're going to look and then look forward to where your new future lies in front of you and see if you still hold on to that same open, deep breathing feeling. And what we did with that is we worked through the foot sensors for grounding, centering, stability. And we did it in a 5-element cycle, which is for nurturing. But we did it in a way, allow the past to feel good, allow the present to feel good, and to allow it to be okay to step into the future. So that's one that I do quite a bit, not necessarily past, present, future, but definitely with the foot sensors and thinking where I am going. And so I just wanted to share that with the listeners, because as Candy's opened up a way for you to think about how a coach might be of assistance for you, whether that's personal or business, but what that coach can do to really help inspire you to the next place, then I hope that we've given you that feeling of being able to stand in that future and go, I'm ready for that. And I'm ready for something new, and I'm ready for something a little bit different. And then you can take the advice that she's offered today and reach out, find someone that really connects with you and makes you feel strong, and checking out Candy's podcast as well. So she's got some great speakers. All right, Candy, anything else you want to add?
I cannot think of anything. I loved that exercise. That was really amazing. I'm in my chair, but I could really feel the shift. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. Yeah, that one, it just always feels good. And I think sometimes with the busyness of life and the activities that surround us in our present, it really muddles up. What does the future look like except with more stuff? And then being able to go, yeah, but the future can look, you can shed off some of that baggage because it's not necessary, because you know exactly where you want to be going and what you might want to be doing. So beautiful. All right. Well, let's do one more toast. Bottom of my teacup. It doesn't always happen, but let's toast everyone that's been listening and the action that they're going to take to make some choices for them. Thank you, Candy, for joining in and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me.
So thank you so much for listening to the Be Well with Michelle Greenwell podcast, and we wish you well. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening to Be Well with Dr. Michelle Greenwell. There are a couple of resources I want to just point out. When you go to the website greenwellcenter.com, you'll have a pop-up window. That pop-up gives you the top 8 easy stress releasers that you can use every day. That's something you can put beside your computer, the bathroom mirror, beside the bedside table. A great resource. Also, my YouTube channel. It is full of playlists with all kinds of different ways that you can activate energy and bring vitality into your day. You can find that when you go to YouTube at Michelle Greenwell. And last, if you're a Linktree person, Linktree, linktr.ee/Greenwell Center. That has all my resources in one spot. Those are for intricate little things that you can't get everywhere. And it's a wonderful way for me to be able to share all the different aspects of the kind of work I do. So thank you for listening. Be sure to drink that tea. And if you want to have the tea blend that was shared in the podcast today, then be sure to check out capebretontea.ca. Have a wonderful day.